The late evening was gray and gloomy. It was raining outside, and the monotonous tapping on the windows drowned out all other sounds in the house. Andrei Sokolov, the CEO of Sokolov Invest, sat in his office. His face was illuminated only by the dim light of a desk lamp. The large oak desk, which he loved for its massiveness and reliability, was cluttered with papers, but Andrei wasn't looking at them. On the screen of his laptop were photographs sent by a private detective. These images burned into his consciousness, making him replay them in his mind again and again. In the first photograph, his wife, Elena, was leaving the doors of a luxurious hotel in central Moscow. Her long dress accentuated her figure, and her hair fell in perfect waves onto her shoulders. Andrew recognized this outfit. She had worn it when she said she was going to a charity event. But standing next to her was Viktor Orlov, his best friend and business partner. They looked like a couple. In the next photo, Viktor was opening the door of his car for Elena, gesturing invitingly for her to get in. Elena was smiling. That same smile Andrei had once believed was meant only for him. Viktor took Andrei in his arms as she walked outside of the vehicle, and they headed to a nearby street. The third frame was taken in a restaurant. They were sitting at a table in a secluded corner, away from the other guests. Viktor leaned toward Elena, whispering something in her ear. Her eyes sparkled, and her hand lightly touched his shoulder. How long has this been going on? Andrew thought, feeling his shock gradually being replaced by anger. Instantly, hunger was replaced by anger. Elena was the woman who had shared his life for the past 10 years. She had supported him during the most challenging moments, stood by him when he was just starting to build his empire. And Viktor, the man with whom they had gone through fire and water, starting with an empty office. Now, both of these people had destroyed his trust. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, took a large sip, and walked over to the window. His office was on the second floor of a country house, with a view of the garden. But now, all he could see was his own reflection in the glass. If they betrayed me like this, he thought, then what else is Viktor hiding? Maybe this is just the tip of the iceberg. On the table lay a report on a project in Singapore, one of the company's largest and most expensive undertakings. Viktor had personally overseen it. Several months ago, the chief accountant had mentioned strange discrepancies in the documentation, but Andrei had brushed it off at the time. Now he felt he had missed something important. Returning to the desk, he opened a notebook and wrote on the first page, "Plan. Exposure." The next morning, Andrei sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, pretending to read the news on his tablet. Elena appeared in the doorway. Her light silk robe fit her figure perfectly, and her hair was neatly tied up in a bun. Ellen was definitely not that lucky to be alone. "Good morning," she said, passing by and leaving a light kiss on his cheek. "Good morning," he replied without looking up from the tablet. "What's your plan for the day?" she asked, pouring herself some coffee. "Meetings in the morning, reports in the evening," Andrei answered calmly, pretending that everything was fine. "And you?" Elena sat down across from him. "Busy day, charity gala, lots to check, decorations, the program, guests. I think I'll be back late." Andrei nodded. Her voice was too light, and her eyes avoided his gaze. "Charity is important," he said, finally looking up. "If you need help, let me know." "Thanks, darling, but we've got it all under control," she quickly replied with a smile. When Elena left, Andrei slowly put his cup down. Behind that smile hid a lie. At the office, Andrei called in Igor, his friend and the company's lawyer. "You said you needed to discuss something important," Igor began, sitting down across from him. Andrei opened his laptop and showed him the photos. "This is, serious," Igor said, studying the pictures. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Andrei replied calmly. "And I suspect this isn't the only problem." He handed Igor the report on the Singapore project. "A year ago, the chief accountant noticed irregularities in the documents. Viktor was overseeing the project, and I'm certain it's connected. Check everything." Igor nodded. "It'll take a few days, but I'll handle it." 15. When Igor left, Andrei looked at the photos again. This time he felt neither pain nor anger, just cold determination. 3 days later, Andrew was sitting in his office when his phone rang. Igor's name lit up on the screen. "What in here? I found something interesting," Igor said, wasting no time. "This isn't just embezzlement, it's much deeper." "Come over," Andrei replied curtly. An hour later, Igor arrived with a folder in hand. He sat across from Andrei and laid the documents on the table. "I started with the Singapore project as you asked. Victor used contractors registered under shell companies. These firms existed only on paper. The money was transferred there and then moved to offshore accounts." Andrei frowned, flipping through the documents. "Whose names are on the accounts? Technically, they're under anonymous owners through complex schemes. But we found a connection to Victor's friend. One, Sergei Vorontsov. They worked together before your company." Andrei gripped his pen tightly. "How much did he take?" "So far, I've found evidence of 50 million rubles. But that's just one contract." At that moment, Andrei felt the fire of anger burn stronger within him. "Can you prove it legally?" Igor nodded. "I'm already preparing documents to submit to the prosecutor's office, but it'll take time." Andrei thought for a moment. "Don't rush, I want this to be flawless. For now, help me figure out who else might be involved." Igor pulled out another folder. "Here's a list of employees who worked on the project. I've already started checking them." Andrei carefully studied each name, trying to find connections. That evening, Andrei returned home. Elena was in the living room, holding a glass of wine. She wore a simple dress, but even in this casual setting, she looked elegant. She began her walk up the stairs to her own bedroom, when Elena suddenly turned and shouted her direction, and pointed at her face. "You're late," she remarked, glancing up at him. "A lot of work," he replied, tossing his jacket over the back of a chair. "We hardly talk anymore," she said, taking a sip. Andrei paused, looking at her with a faint smirk. "Perhaps there's a reason for that." Her face tensed for a moment, but she quickly composed herself. "Andrei, if something's on your mind, just say it." He said nothing, silently walking past her. At that moment he realized something had long been broken in their relationship. In his office, Andrei opened the surveillance recordings from the cameras he had installed a few months earlier. He fast-forwarded through the footage from last week, when Elena had claimed she was attending a charity event. In the footage, she was seen leaving the house, getting into a taxi and heading downtown. Half an hour later, the taxi stopped at the same hotel, captured in the detective's photos. Andrei clenched his teeth. Every one of her movements, every lie, pushed him closer to decisive action. The next day, Andrei met with Maria Klimova, the company's financial director. She was one of the few people he trusted completely. "Maria, I need your help," he began, inviting her into his office. "Of course," she replied, sitting across from him. "Review all the contracts related to the Singapore project, check the contractors, deadlines, amounts, everything." Maria frowned. "Are there suspicions?" "Right now, just a hunch. But I need to be sure everything is under control." "Got it. When do you need the results?" "As soon as possible." When Maria left, Andrei opened his email. Among hundreds of messages, one from Victor caught his attention. It was dated several months ago, and discussed the project with contractors whose names Andrei didn't recognize. He saved all the data and sent it to Igor with a note. "Check this." A week later, Maria returned with the results of her audit. "I found something strange," she began, spreading documents on his desk. Andrei sat down, listening attentively. "Several contractors are registered under companies created just a couple of months before signing the contracts. They have no offices, and their owners are frontmen." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." Andrei leaned back in his chair. This was the confirmation he had been waiting for. "Excellent, Maria, thank you." When she left, Andrei called Igor. "We have everything, it's time to act. Prepare the documents for the board meeting." "When do you plan to present this?" "In 2 weeks. I want them to have no room for excuses." Several days passed. Andrew meticulously prepared for the upcoming board meeting. He knew that to strike precisely, he needed to gather irrefutable evidence and carefully build his strategy. Late one evening, he met with Igor at a quiet restaurant in central Moscow. Igor brought updates. "All the documents are ready," Igor said, placing a flash drive on the table. "Here's a full analysis including transactions, shell companies, and links to Victor." Andrew nodded. "Good, but I need one more thing." Igor raised an eyebrow. "What exactly? What's the information about his personal connections, especially anything involving my employees?" Igor thought for a moment. "You suspect someone in your company is involved?" "I'm certain. Victor couldn't have done this alone. He must have had accomplices." Igor sighed. "This won't be easy, but I'll handle it." After the meeting, Andrew decided to take a walk through the evening city. The rain had stopped, and the air was fresh, but his mind was swirling with thoughts. He felt as though he had reached a point of no return. "Once I start, there's no turning back," he thought, gazing at the lights along the embankment. During those same days, Elena continued her usual routine: charity events, meetings with friends, visits to expensive salons. All of it created an illusion of normalcy. It would have been hope, but that didn't escape my official and my judges for what this return to normalcy really was. However, Andrew began to notice that her behavior had changed. She smiled less often and increasingly avoided interacting with him. One evening, as Andrei sat in his office, he overheard a phone call. Elena's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "Yes," she said. "Of course I'll be there. Are you sure no one will find out?" Andrew froze. He moved closer to the office door, trying to catch more of the conversation. "Good. Then see you tomorrow." When the call ended, Andrei returned to his desk and opened an app that tracked calls made from her phone. The number was unfamiliar, but the call originated from abroad. He quickly wrote down the number and sent it to Igor, with the note, "Check this urgently." Back to the tape. The next morning, Igor called back. "The number belongs to Victor." Andrei felt cold rage sweep over him. Igor continued his investigation, and soon, new details surfaced. It turned out that Victor had not only used shell companies, but also recruited Andrei's employees to cover his tracks. "Your head of procurement," Igor said, showing him a report, "was involved in this scheme. He signed all the documents without proper verification." "Alexei?" Andrew struggled to keep his composure. "Yes, and it looks like he received generous compensation for it." Andrew frowned. Alexei had worked for him for 10 years. He was someone Andrew had trusted implicitly. "What do we have on him?" "Emails, call logs, transactions in his accounts. All lead back to Victor." "Then prepare the data. I want him present at the board meeting as well." Igor nodded. "Are you sure you can handle this?" Andrew looked at him with cold determination. "I have no other choice." That evening, Andrei once again crossed paths with Elena. She came home late, though she had said she would be having dinner with her friends. "Tough day?" he asked as she entered the living room. "Yes," she replied, avoiding his gaze. "We've had so much to do for the charity event." Andrei silently watched as she poured herself a glass of wine. "Are you sure everything's fine with you?" Elena froze for a brief moment, her hand trembling slightly before she quickly regained her composure. "Of course. Why do you ask?" "No reason," he said with a faint smirk. "I just want to make sure everything's all right." Her tension was evident, but she didn't let it show further. When Elena went to bed, Andrei returned to his surveillance recordings. He found the moment from a few days prior, where she returned home carrying a shopping bag. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about it. But upon zooming in, he noticed the logo of a hotel. The day of the board meeting finally arrived. Andrei arrived at the office earlier than usual, determined to personally oversee every last preparation to ensure nothing was overlooked. The board members began gathering in the conference room. The atmosphere was tense. Rumors about the scale of Victor's embezzlement had spread through the company, and everyone was eager to hear the details. Once everyone was present, Andrew began. "Dear colleagues," he started, his voice steady but carrying a sharp edge. "Over the past several months, our company has faced significant challenges. Today, I am presenting the results of an internal audit. He activated the presentation. On the screen appeared charts, tables, and documents outlining the transactions, shell companies, and Victor's connections. These findings confirm that the Singapore project was used as a front for large-scale embezzlement. The chief organizer of this scheme was Victor Orlov. Sitting across the table, Victor tried to maintain a calm demeanor, but Andrei noticed his hands twitch nervously. "This is slander," Victor suddenly shouted. "All of this data has been fabricated." "Then explain," Andrei replied coolly, pointing to the screen, "why all these companies are linked to your friends and associates." The screen displayed names and faces, including Alexei and Anton Kovalev, the head of the contracts department. "Moreover," Andrei continued, "we discovered correspondence in which Kovalev explicitly confirms his collaboration with you." Kovalev's clear vocabulary asserts Quen. Anton, pale and visibly shaken, tried to stammer out a defense, but the board wouldn't let him speak. "I propose we immediately dismiss all involved employees and hand over the materials to the prosecutor's office," one of the board members said. The vote was unanimous. Victor and his accomplices were permanently removed from their positions. After the meeting, Victor caught up with Andrei in the hallway. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "I won't forget what you've done." Andrew turned to face him, his gaze ice cold. "No, Victor," he said firmly. "You'll regret what you've done. You destroyed everything we built together. Now reap the consequences." Victor stood silently as Andrei walked away without a backward glance. A few days later, Andrei received a notification that the prosecutor's office had officially opened a case against Victor and his associates. Newspapers were filled with headlines about the scandal at Sokolov Invest. Elena, meanwhile, made one last attempt to reconcile with Andrei. She called him early one morning. "Andrei, please, hear me out," her voice trembled. "I know I made a mistake, but I want to fix it." "You already have, Elena," Andrei replied, "by leaving." And with that, he ended the call. A month passed. Andrei's company had fully restored its reputation. During internal meetings, he announced a new project that promised to be a groundbreaking success. Maria visited his office with the latest report. "Quarterly revenues have grown by 15%, she said with a smile. "Clients are trusting us again." "It's thanks to you and the entire team," Andrei replied. "We did it." He looked out over the city through his office window. The past month had been grueling but had given him a renewed perspective. Trust must never be blind, even with those closest to you. Having left the house, Elena moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. Her life had changed beyond recognition. Glamorous social events and expensive dinners were now things of the past. She tried to find work, but her tarnished reputation made it impossible. Even her former friends spoke of her with disdain. One day, she came across a magazine article highlighting the successes of Sokolov Invest. The article included a photo of Andrei, exuding confidence and calm. "I've lost him forever," she thought, closing the magazine. Andrei stood on the balcony of his house, holding a glass of whiskey. The city stretched out before him in lights. Memories flashed through his mind. Betrayal, struggle, recovery. She even led her toward the building. "Every mistake is a lesson. Every betrayal is an opportunity for a new start," he thought, gazing at the starry sky. The next day, a new project and a new challenge awaited him, and he was ready for whatever came next.